Allora, tra 30 secondi inizia lo streaming, vi do io il via così andiamo in onda quando può andare in onda il segnale per trasmettere in streaming il tutto.
And that is segregated data, including data on age and other differential.
Può andare. Dottoressa Mistretta, la scena è tutta sua, grazie.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here and for having invited me to chair this event this afternoon in the framework of the conference about women and armed force in the 20th anniversary of the entrance of women in the Italian armed force. And this afternoon it is a pleasure to chair this panel about the commitment of international military missions about the perspective of gender. So we will see how women are a key role in these missions in the light of a UN resolution about women, peace and security. My name is Eliana Mistretta. I am a journalist of RAI, the Italian public broadcaster, and I have been several times in war zones for my work. So I know very well these atmospheres, these environments, and I have witnessed many times with my eyes how women are important, but unfortunately how quite often women are victims, the first victims in wars. And in order to go deep in this panel that we will host many important speakers, in my brief introduction I would like to start from two recent examples of wars. First of all, the war in the former Yugoslavia and then the war in Rwanda. Why? Because these are important examples. If we look at the war in the former Yugoslavia, the International Criminal Court has sentenced 32 persons with 500 years of imprisonment because of rapes vis-à-vis women in 1991. So this to give you an example of how women are a target in wars, how women become a target and a kind of weapon in this war because they are raped and they are the object of violence, so that the International Criminal Court for Yugoslavia sentenced 32 persons. A similar situation was registered in the war in Rwanda, where there have been penalties for more than 250,000 rapes. So once again, in a very sad conflict like Rwanda was, women have been once again the object of violence. And there are so many other examples. So just to go to more recent days about the wars and the conflicts in Iraq, and also if we can think about Yazidi women, how they were a target of the ISIS. So in the aftermath of the war, women are also important. They have also a key role in going back to peace and security. So when women are a target in war, when they are object of violence, then when the war is over, it is even more difficult to involve them in a peace process because they end up being in the margin of society. They have been victims of violence, them and their children too, quite often. And it is very difficult to involve them and to give them a key role. And yet, as we know, women can give an important contribution to peace and to the development of a country which goes out from a conflict. We have some few positive examples, such as Liberia, where after the war in 2002, women started having an important role, so that today we have a woman, Lima Gbagbo, who is the head of state, the president, but unfortunately there are very few positive examples. That's why at the beginning of the year 2000, United Nations started to tackle very seriously this problem. And there is a cornerstone in the story of UN resolution, which is the resolution of 1325, which focus on women, peace and security, which is the subject that we are dealing with this afternoon. This resolution of the United Nations is very important because it is the base on how to deal with this problem, how to deal with women, peace and security. Not only this resolution gives many guidelines to follow, but it is a kind of manifesto. It is a call for everybody to focus on the role of women and, above all, to tackle another important subject, which is the gender perspective. The gender perspective is quite crucial because gives the idea even to military forces how to tackle with the gender differences, how to see problems under a gender point of view. The resolution 1325 is of course, is a UN resolution, but it is addressed also by a governmental and non-governmental organization. It is important for peacekeepers, and it is important also for military contingent. So that's why, under a military point of view, this resolution involves a kind of a gender perspective in the process of planning and also in the creation of a special role which is dedicated to this issue, the gender advisor, which usually now, since that resolution, works in the military framework. Each country, of course, has to receive this resolution, and as a consequence, as it often happens with UN resolutions, the single member countries have to make some national plans, just like Italy did. We remember that on the military point of view, Italy has a very key role at an international level. I just remind you that Italy is the 7th contributor as a peacekeeping of United Nations, and it is the first of Western countries to give blue helmet in peace mission on the field. And they are evolving, they are working a lot on the framework of this resolution, the 1325, under several points of view. Since the year 2010, there have been 3 editions of a National Plan of Actions in implementing this resolution. And so Italy has had, the military in Italy had the objective, the target of giving some monitoring operation, of financially supporting many projects, supporting the feminine conditions in the areas, in the conflict zones. One of the main guidelines of this national action plan of Italy concerns the education, the training of the personnel, and the spreading of a culture, a real culture of women, peace, and security. So that's why the Italian defense has organized, since the year 2014, many courses for gender advisor, and they have given the instruments to carry out a role of counseling of commanders. And this, of course, has been very important because many problems on the field have been tackled. This is a great added value, as you can understand, because this gives the possibility to tackle the gender differences, to see things under gender perspective. And another important point in this process has been the involvement of women soldiers. Today we are having this conference because we are reminding the 20th anniversary of the entrance of women in the Italian military. Well, having women military, women soldiers, has been quite crucial in the war zones. So this brief introduction has the aim of focusing on this problem. We have many important guests this afternoon, and as I was telling you before, at the beginning of my presentation, the resolution of the United Nations is implemented at several levels. Of course, one of the key actors at an international level is the European Union. European Union shares this value of importance of women, of peace, of equality, of democracy. These are the fundamental values of a European Union, which has always focused on human rights, on pluralism. So that's why now, talking about European Union, I would like to go to our first speaker, our first host, who is Ms. Charlotte Isaacson. Ms. Charlotte Isaacson is the Senior Gender Advisor to the European External Action Service, and which is a Principal Advisor on Gender, and she's really the good person to talk about the mission within the policy of defense and common security of European Union. So, Mrs. Isaacson, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you also for the very kind introduction, and also for this very nice invitation to get to celebrate both the anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, but also the 20th anniversary of women into the military in Italy, which is really something we should celebrate, and also you should be very proud of that. And having been in different places in the world, including also in headquarters in capitals, and I've been working closely together with many Italian colleagues over the years, and it has been not only a great pleasure, but also a great contributor to the effective implementation of the Women, Peace, and Security agenda. So I wanted to say this because indeed, and very obviously, the work you do at the national base, you really contribute also in wider circles into the multilateral and regional organizations. And I think this is really worth to connect those dots. I will be very brief, but saying with 1325, of course, it's a political priority and a key objective of the European Union. And as you were very correctly pointed out, we work with human rights and gender equality, and the European Union is a very active player multilaterally, regionally, and locally on all these topics. We are very proud, and we recently adopted just a couple of weeks ago the Gender Action Plan 3, where we actually have included women, peace, and security policy framework into the broader agenda of gender equality and women's empowerment, because for the European Union policy on women, peace, and security, the key method of doing that is actually gender mainstreaming, to mainstream systematically a gender perspective, to base that on a gender analysis. And that's not a nice thing to do. It's actually a key objective of being effective in the implementation of the political, strategic, and operational objective. And if we do not get our analysis related to gender rights, we can really not deliver very effectively on security.
I think we have a problem with your audio. Mrs. Isaacson, can you hear us? I think there is a problem with the connection. Mrs. Isaacson, can you hear us? Are you still with us? I think the line is off, so I hope we can go back to Mrs. Isaacson from the European Union, who was talking about this important issue about the European level, but unfortunately, we are forced to do online events because of the COVID, which is very sad, but at least it's important to have the chance of being together no matter how. And I hope we can recover the connection with Mrs. Isaacson later. So I suggest we can go on with the other speakers, and then if Mrs. Isaacson can come back and reactivate the connection, maybe we can go back to her afterwards, if you all agree about that. Okay, so I think we can go to our second speaker, who is a person who is working very hard to spread these things within the Atlantic Alliance. I'm talking about Ms. Claire Hutchinson, Special Representative of the Secretary General of NATO for Women, Peace and Security. The office of Ms. Hutchinson has competencies also in the protection of minors and citizens in armed conflict, and she's supporting the Secretary General of NATO for making the yearly report about the implementation of UN resolution. And if we look at the report of the year 2017, I'm quoting, the responsibility of being one of the main protector of human rights of women. NATO has the responsibility of protecting women as well. Allies recognize that the integration of gender perspectives in the main tasks of NATO gives a great contribution to a more modern, ready and reactive NATO. The Alliance is committed in promoting the role of women in peace and security and to support the implementation of UN resolutions in this subject. So now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Claire Hutchinson. Please, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, and I hope you can hear me okay. It's a shame we couldn't get to hear my dear friend Charlotte, but I know that we would have been we're on the same page with a lot of things we have to say. So I just want to first thank the Italian Defence General Staff for the invitation. I'm really delighted I can join you, not only, as Charlotte said, for the anniversary of this 1325 resolution, but also for the anniversary of women in the Italian forces, and that is having worked with many women from the Italian forces and many colleagues, both in NATO and the UN. I know what a great contribution the Italians make. So as we know, the adoption of the first resolution on women, peace and security was a watershed moment because it forced us to recognise the impact of conflict on women and girls, but more importantly, asked us the question, where are the women? And before the adoption of Resolution 1325, women had been quite loudly absent in the discussions around conflict and the resolution of conflict. So 1325 is about opening spaces and dislodging obstacles to women's participation in decisions around conflict and peace. It highlights women can act as catalysts in the transformation to peace, because women play a prominent role in prevention and resolution of conflict and in restoration of rule of law and governance. Women serve as mediators of disputes, hold families together in times of conflict, identify and manage resources when they're often few, and in many cases defend and protect, often at great personal risk. Over the last 20 years, the Women, Peace and Security agenda has expanded its scope. Starting with 1325, we now have 10 Security Council resolutions that have given us all more latitude to explore emerging challenges to security. And the agenda has ultimately changed the philosophy and rhetoric around conflict and gender equality, and has challenged the international community to step up and do more. So we at NATO have taken up this challenge. While nations have the primary responsibility for implementing women, peace and security, we as a political and military organisation are playing our part by turning words into action. From the first NATO policy on women, peace and security in 2007 to the current iteration in 2018, which was endorsed by the heads of state and government at the Brussels summit, we've reaffirmed our commitment to the principles of women, peace and security by putting our principles into practice. And over the years, we've come to see not only the merit of women, peace and security as an operational, but how critical it is to all of that we do. So through our policy, NATO has enshrined 3 principles, which we call the 3 I's. And these principles create the foundation upon which we believe gender equality can grow across our structure. Our principles reinforce the goal that gender equality must be integral to all our activities, operations, missions, and in our core tasks of collective defence, crisis management, and cooperative security. So I'll just take you quickly through these. So the first I of inclusiveness is that about increasing numbers of women in national forces, but also in NATO, but more importantly, in leadership positions. We commit to increasing numbers of women within our alliance, and we also encourage our nations to deploy more women. To be authentic means women must be given a voice at all levels, including in leadership and decision-making positions, to operational strategic levels, and in public engagement. We recognise quite early the value of deploying women to our operations. In Afghanistan, our situational awareness was significantly enhanced because service women were deployed to ISAF, in some cases where they could engage with local women in ways that men could not. And we know that Italy was important in this, in Herat, where concerns by local residents were given to the Italian regiment, who then decided to have women soldiers guarding the outer perimeter in the provincial reconstruction team headquarters. And in KFOR, NATO's operation in Kosovo, the connections made with women's civil society have been essential to maintaining safe and secure environments. And I am personally thrilled that I've been able to engage with Kosovo and look forward to more engagement, as I know they're represented today. We've made real progress in this area. The average percentage of women in armed forces and NATO allies is around 12%. Different nations range from about 17% to 3%, but collectively it's about 12%. And 85% of NATO members have all of their positions open to women. And we're seeing greater numbers of women in leadership positions in our military structures, but also as defense ministers, which we saw recently at the NATO Defense Ministerial. And we have 2 military representatives on the military committee. So we believe the key role that women can play in securing peace and security. However, inclusiveness is not a numerical exercise, and these concepts are not about counting. We know that significant reform, particularly in defense, must be accompanied by effective training and awareness raising and integrating a gender perspective. And so to this, I want to reiterate. Increasing women does not make operational effectiveness on its own. You cannot just deploy women and expect things to change. It has to be coupled with mainstreaming and cultural shifts where men are engaged in this agenda to advance equality. Women, peace and security is not a woman's issue. It is a security issue. And therefore, everybody has to be engaged in addressing security and the risks to that. And the second I stands for integration. The principle that recognizes women and men are affected by policies and programs. And again, it's about mainstreaming and to make sure that we mainstream into all our work, from strategic intelligence requirements to counterterrorism, defense planning processes, and capability development. Integrating gender will help us ensure the resilience of the whole of our societies and bolster our ability to defend and deter. And we've been deploying specialized women and men as gender advisors to help our commanders in missions and operations. And they help to integrate gender. The first NATO gender advisors were deployed to Afghanistan in 2009, and now we have them across all of our missions and operations. And we've learned about integrating gender and learned lessons from Afghanistan. And so our new mission and newest mission in Iraq has integrated gender from the beginning all the way through. Gender advisors are deployed as part of senior advisory group, and it's mainstreamed in the planning guidance and assessment processes. And we're also making sure to integrate gender into all our functions, because it's not just about operations. We're looking at gendered early warning indicators, how we can identify hotspots and use indicators to give us better information that we can then disaggregate by sex and that we can do better in terms of intelligence response. We're also making sure gender is integrated into countering terrorism and other emerging security risks, because we have to understand that women are both victims and perpetrators. It's important for us to implement this agenda to understand that women cannot be essentialized and that they have agency in also working against peace. And the final I for our policy is integrity, which is critical as we build trust and faith in the alliance, because it's about how we conduct ourselves. We believe we have a responsibility to make sure those deployed observe the highest standards of behavior, whatever the circumstance. And that is why we adopted our first ever comprehensive policy to prevent and respond to sexual exploitation abuse last year. Winning the hearts and minds of a local population is essential to winning any sort of conflict. And I've been deployed many times. I know this to be true. Any form of sexual exploitation abuse damages our reputation and ultimately impacts operational effectiveness. We believe that equal treatment, dignity, and respect is imperative in times of war and peace, and that is a platinum standard of an alliance. We have to put this into all of our responses, in all of our daily work. And so we're also focusing on protection from conflict-related sexual violence, which is a tactic of war. It's used to destroy communities and intimidate. And so this year, in this coming year, our council has tasked us to develop a policy that recognizes the effect on the community, and so that it becomes in part entrenched in our collective thinking, but that also we know how to respond to conflict-related sexual violence. So as I close, I just want to highlight a little bit about the future, because we understand the strong correlation between gender equality and a country's stability. And as a military and political alliance, we recognize the security needs of women and men are very different. And we are making sure that all our work adequately reflects the whole of population approach. And that is through our human security work. In 2021, we are going to drive harder to institutionalize the mandate at political and operational levels. We'll be revisioning the agenda and reinforcing our efforts through strengthened integration across all our core tasks, increasing our capacity, enhancing our awareness, and our accountability. We're committed to guaranteeing that all our tasks are infused with gender, and gender perspectives are weaved through our work. For NATO, integrating gender is a matter of credibility and capability, a matter of institutional excellence and operational effectiveness. To generally advance gender equality, we must be vigilant in promoting the integration of gender perspectives into all our functions and enabling the participation of women and also enhancing their protection. It's only when gender becomes an integral part of our thinking is the way of doing business will change. Gender equality is not optional, it's fundamental, and it allows us to recognize, understand, and respond to the many complex security challenges that we face today. Thank you very much. I wish you a wonderful conference, wonderful engaged conversations on this. Unfortunately, I do have to leave a little early because I have another engagement, but thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson, for your precious words. As you were rightly saying, women issues do not only concern women, and as far as we are not able to spread the wider culture and to involve men as well, it will be difficult to go on this way. But fortunately, we are working in the right direction. So thank you for intervention, for the huge work you are carrying out to spread this doctrine within the NATO, and also for the passion that we can feel from your words. And now let's see what is happening in Italy, how this policy is received in our country. So we go to our guest, the plenipotentiary minister Fabrizio Petri, who is president of the Interministerial Committee for Human Rights, and he's in charge of working on this document in the national policy for women, peace and security. So fundamentally, he's working on the plan of action, which is giving a contribution to our country. And I'd like, Mr. Petri, first of all, welcome and thank you for being with us. I would like you to tell us how this policy is received in Italy and how the defense is giving a contribution in implementing this policy. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm really happy, and I would like to thank the Ministry of Defense and Colonel Vinci Guerra for creating this moment, for hosting this webinar. It's very, very important for us because it's also a way to show in a very clear manner how the Italian institution keep in a really important place the women and peace security agenda. And I was very happy to listen to our friend from the NATO. And unfortunately, the European Union, we could not listen the whole of her intervention. But really, I was very, very happy to hear the words of our friend, Madam Hutchinson. Now, also, is very important the timing of this meeting, because you, in the introduction, you very kindly said that we have 3 national plans since 2010. Well, just last week, the Interministerial Committee for Human Rights, I'm president of, approved the 4th National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. So Italy has just released, it's on the website of our committee, and we have just released the new National Plan on Women, Peace and Security, which is the 4th National Plan, and this time is a quadriennial plan, so it's 2020-2024. So we are very, very happy of the timing of this webinar. Also, there are, and I'm very happy for your question, there are 3 aspects of our plan that we think can be very useful at international level. Of course, to release a national plan is an achievement, in this case for our country, but it's also useful at international level. So there are 3, let's say, basic issues that are really the pillars of our, and I think that they can be interesting also at the international level. The first is that this plan has been written in total coordination with the civil society and the academic world. It's not only a matter of consultation. We didn't simply make a consultation with the civil society. We co-written the entire plan. We created within the committee a specific open-ended working group in which there are all the concerned administration, civil societies, the syndicates, and the academic world. And the plan, so this National Action Plan, was 1 year work done together with civil societies and the academic world. And I would like to underline this because I speak one moment of our committee. Just recently, the United Nations declared that the Interministerial Committee for Human Rights of Italy is a recognized international best practice. Of course, we were very pleased of this important recognition, but the point is that one of the main factors that brought us to have this important recognition by the United Nations is the fact that we have a very strong dialogue with the civil society. And the Women, Peace and Security National Plan is based on this constructive dialogue. The second point that I would like to make is that our is a living document. So in the next 4 years, we will constantly have the open-ended working group working on the implementation of the plan, again involving civil society and academic world, and we will also, in case new issues or new aspects will emerge, both nationally or internationally, we will bring the new ideas and the new perspective into our national plan. So it's a living document. The third thing that I would like to underline is that the whole approach is what I use a little bit of a big word, is an holistic approach. So we put together the 3 pillars of the United Nations: peace and security, development, and human rights, and the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, and mainly the famous goal 5, empowerment of women, and 16, rule of law. So the whole of our approach in writing the 4th national plan of Italy has been based on these 3 aspects that I told you. Also, the structure is put in a way. There are 4 areas. I just mentioned them. The first is reinforcing the role of women in peace processes and strengthening the interaction with the civil society. The second one, I will come back to this, is the role of women in the peace operation in army and police. The third one is the gender balance, gender empowerment, and children protection in conflict. And the 4th area is strategic communication, advocacy, and Italian participation in relevant forums. But the point is that with this approach, we would like to underline the fact that is a vision for the future, from the perspective, of course, of the agenda of women, peace and security, in which women become actors of change to build more resilient, just, and equal societies. Also, because of this approach that, as I said before, is a little bit holistic, we believe that there are certain values, this is the right word to use, that are they go through all the 38 actions. The plan is divided in 4 areas, and in total there are 38 actions, measures. So there are 2 values that are mainly there. One is that we believe, is a strong belief that we have in the transformational role of women. Also already this was made clear but from the speakers before me, but we really strongly believe that women have a capacity of transformation. So this is transformational role of women, and this is why they should be more and more involved in peace processes and also as leaders, because they have a capacity to bring a transformational value into the processes. The second aspect is the violence against women. Of course, we all know that that is a huge issue. In our approach, of course, it's linked also to the Istanbul Convention. And so we try to see again in a holistic manner also the issue of violence. Finally, there is an aspect that is emerging as a very important aspect for Italy. So it's again in different areas of the national plan. It's the protection of girls and children in war situation. Italy made a very important pledge in the 33rd conference of the Red Cross last year in Geneva, and this pledge is becoming a big success. So it's very important for us to focus also on this point. In our national plan, there is a big focus which is divided into the several areas on this issue. And at the end, but as always we know, last but not least, there is the important role of defense. The defense is playing a very important role. Of course, since the beginning, I would like to underline, it's 4 years that I am president of the committee, but this process goes back in years. But since the beginning, it's more than 10 years, it's really with the defense that we have that has playing a key role in this issue, and we are extremely happy of the collaboration that there is with the Minister of Defense. So I would like to take this opportunity to underline this, because we are aware of the key role that they have in the Women, Peace and Security agenda. Just very briefly, I would like to remember that there are 3 sets of action. The one, the number 2.4, is training. I don't say a word more because has already been said the importance of training. The second one are number 2.6, 2.7, which are focusing on internal and external communication initiative on gender perspective. And this is very important because there is nothing to do. Communication is at the base of everything. The third thing is the action 2.9, which wants to intensify the collaboration between the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Internal Affairs on the issue of the protection and safety of girls and boys who live in situation of armed conflict. So there are is really about a change through a cultural approach that must really go through communication, strategic communication, training, seminars. The only way is really to talk about this issue and turn it into a real change in reality. So thank you again for this occasion, and really I am very happy to be here with you, and I will of course listen up to the end of this session. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ministro Plenipotenziario Fabrizio Petri. Thank you for your intervention. It is interesting to see how the gender perspective, women, peace and security, it is an issue that has to be tackled at several levels, a cultural level of course, but it's interesting to see how it involves many key players in our society. Now I've been told that we are glad, we are lucky, we have recovered the connection with Ms. Charlotte Isaacson. Are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you. Do you hear me?
Okay, so Charlotte Isaacson, I remind Senior General Advisor, European External Action Service. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. I know I use some of my minutes. I will be very brief, but so I apologize for this. Brussels is a very unpredictable place, apparently. What I wanted to say is that we have a very robust policy framework. We are very proud. The High Representative is very clear on implementing this. He told several times now during the fall. He's also very clear on one necessity of being able to do this, including to implement the Women, Peace and Security agenda, is to establish a requirement of a gender-responsive leadership. That's the new norm for the European Union leaders and managers, and this is a leadership that goes beyond what we perhaps would call the more symbolic leadership on gender, where you say something sometimes now and then in a conference, or a special day, International Women's Day, etc. While that is important, we aim for more. So the bar is much higher. We have included Women, Peace and Security in our new Gender Action Plan 3. It's part and parcel of that, so we position it in the broader gender equality agenda. We have also made very clear that the key tool to implement the Women, Peace and Security agenda for the European Union is gender mainstreaming, the use of gender analysis and the systematic integration of a gender perspective. And we even go so far as to say that it's more likely that gender mainstreaming is enhancing our security than the addition of women are doing it. So So the inclusion of women and gender mainstreaming are not necessarily the same thing. It's two things that are both leading towards gender equality, but we have to refrain from those stereotypical assumptions that, having women in any capacity actually means certain things, because there is very little evidence of that. And what we say in our policy clearly is that we have to enhance the number of women. We are, not as good as we would need to be in that. But we have to do that without reinforcing gender stereotypes, because we cannot continue to have this idea that, those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fantastic things will happen if we have more women, because again, there is quite little evidence of that. And until the day we ask, what added value our male colleagues bring, we should perhaps not even ask that question, because of course, that's also equality in the end of the day. So we need to refrain from that. We also need to really understand that this is not about being born a man or a woman primarily. It is a capability, it's a competence, it's something you learn. This means, this is good news in NATO or in European Union military contexts where we have many men still, and where we want more women, but that's based on not necessarily the efficiency argument, it's based on a rights-based argument. So this is European Union bottom line. That's a right. That's not, to say that to have women, they will, add certain things, which they might do, but might not do. So it is a capability, it's a competence, it's something you learn. That's also why, if an all-male setting can actually systematically integrate the gender perspective and conduct gender analysis. And finally, I want to say that not doing the gender analysis, not integrating a gender perspective leads to insecurity, and that leads to risks. So this is critical. It's not something that me as a gender person say just because I'm very, engaged and passionate. It is critical for security, and if we do not bring this in, it increases our insecurities, and we see so many situations where those assumptions of what women should do, or that they are more peaceful and friendly and not so aggressive, that's not true. Women are increasingly active in terrorism, in violent extremism, in the radicalization process, in the political economy around terrorism, etc., etc. So we really need to help each other, we think, to see things clearly as they are, based on facts and evidence, rather than what we saw in films or what we read in books when we were small kids. So the EU made up their mind. The leadership is fully on board. The High Representative is really going in the front of this topic. The EU Parliament is really also working very closely together with us on this topic. And I just want to say that to fully implement the Women, Peace and Security agenda, we need more women, because that's important in its own right. We also need to engage actively and genuinely with women's civil society organizations. And we need to make sure that all our analytical and planning processes are informed by a gender perspective. And gender balance and gender mainstreaming then is not necessarily the same thing. So thank you again for organizing this important celebration of two very important, almost like twins, 20th anniversary. So we celebrate you, and we say thank you, and we wish you the best of luck with your further work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Charlotte Isaacson. Thank you for having been with us, and we are glad we recovered your connection. Thank you so much for your intervention. And I think at this point we can go to another extinguished guest, the General di Corpo d'Armata Luciano Portolano. He is leading the operational command of Vertice Interforze of Italian Defense. And thank you, General Portolano. I would like you to talk about how the principles of women, peace and security are put in place in our missions. You have the floor.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. Thanks a lot, Mrs. Liliana Mistretta, for moderating this panel. And first of all, I would like to thank the general staff for organizing this seminar and all the distinguished guest speakers, the ladies and gentlemen who are online taking part in it. Well, today, with reference to your question, to the topic, in the next few minutes, let me share with you some of my thoughts on three main issues. Firstly, Italy's commitment to fostering the role of women within the armed forces. Secondly, the effort to implement and apply the principles of national and international guidance and directives in planning and executing all operations and missions the Italian defense is carrying out. And then the last point, some personal considerations on possible future developments, or if you wish, possible ways ahead. Starting with a reference to the Italian commitment to fostering the role of women within the armed forces, I do underline that our Department of Defense reaffirms its unwavering commitment to promote women's empowerment and gender equality. We know that this year marks the 20th anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which established the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. But in the same year, in the year 2000, the Italian Parliament approved a law which allowed the female personnel to serve within the armed forces, ensuring full access for women to join the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Carabinieri. The mentioned UN Security Council Resolution 1325 is a pioneering document and remains absolutely relevant even today. It has encouraged profound change in the approach to division of the role of women in conflict, making now possible that they are not only the main victims of any form of crisis and conflict, but sometimes important key players in providing unique and unprecedented contribution to the challenging peacekeeping, peace-building, peacemaking processes, but also in more demanding peace-enforcing environment or in crisis preventions, or in post-conflict reconstruction missions, including the reintegration program and processes. Indeed, the positive correlation between the substantial participation of women in peace and in peace processes and the probability of reaching an inclusive and lasting agreement is very well documented, although women remain underrepresented in many countries in transition from war to lasting peace. But as far as Italy is concerned, over the past 20 years, the Italian General Staff has been strongly committed and has gone through a continuous process of positive adaptation and adjustment aimed at achieving a more effective implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, both internally and externally in overseas mission and operations, mainly applying a broad gender perspective and the gender mainstreaming with a significant contribution from our female personnel. In this field, the Italian doctrine, directives and procedures have been constantly updated to adapt to the development of the relevant UN, NATO, EU resolutions, directives, and guidelines concerning the agenda. And the content of these directives and procedures now forms part of the curriculum of our personnel in all military education information systems, is part of all formation processes, and it is implemented in our training centers. Furthermore, let me say that our military personnel is provided with additional tailored training before deployment in theater operations in accordance with the characteristics of the area of operations, but at the same time, in accordance with the perception and the sensitivities the local population has on these specific subjects. In particular, during the pre-deployment training, there are sessions devoted to the issues we are discussing today. These sessions are conceived, organized, and executed under the supervision of my gender advisor, and the gender perspective is applied across all the operational functions, both in real-world operations as well as in training activities or exercise. But to reach today's state of art, let me say that since the year 2000, we have worked hard to improve our capacities and capabilities to deal with gender issues. We have gone through the crawling phases to move the initial steps. Then we have learned how to work in this complex and challenging field. But there is still some work to be done to effectively run towards the full goals of the agenda. And in this context, I would like to highlight that the Italian Armed Forces continue playing an active role in the implementation of the National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security, working in close cooperation with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the International Development Cooperation Agency. And I'm glad to hear from Minister Petri an update concerning the new plan and an anticipation of its implications for the Italian MOD. In terms of efforts to apply in practice the principles of the national and the international guidance and directives in planning and executing the operations and missions, which is the second point I want to share with you. This morning, we had the opportunity to listen to some excellent testimonies from our high-quality officers serving in the Italian defense. They represent only a small part of many women deployed in different roles and ranks in operations abroad. All of them are brave and capable. And these female soldiers are positive examples of other young women wishing to join the Italian Armed Forces, thereby supporting the process of increasing the presence of women within the Italian defense and consequently increasing the percentage of female soldiers in area of crisis. As a matter of fact, a presence of 6% that has not yet met the goals of the Parliament, as we heard this morning from our Italian Vice Chief of Defense, Lieutenant General Delle Verano. In terms of women serving in the operational environments, role which somehow falls within my responsibilities, I would like to share with you a couple of my personal experiences. First, the first Italian female members of the armed forces deployed in Iraq, in Dikar province in Nasiriyah, very well-known area, in 2003 in a quite challenging scenario. This marked an important step forward towards the full integration of women in the armed forces. As a regimental commander, I had to carry out a number of tasks, including operational activities as well as key leader engagements in the framework of a local Muslim, Shia, and Sunni community. And in this context, our female soldiers played a key role in performing a number of activities. Let me recall searching local women during distribution of food and primary needs, carrying out clearing and searching operations, patrolling built-up areas, in particular small villages, or working with the local women in providing medical care for children and women. And all represent a real, exceptional, effective force multiplier, very well accepted by the local community without jeopardizing the relationship with the local population and authorities. On the contrary, gaining respect, empowering other core military functions to achieve these objectives. Nevertheless, I have to say that this first process of employing female military teams in operations was basically developed by intuition and contingency rather than based on a deliberate planning process. However, I still acknowledge that had we not employed these intuitive options, we would not have successfully achieved our tactical goals. But while in Iraq, the first employment of women was intuitive, in Afghanistan, the lessons learned were fruitful tools for an effective and deliberate approach, providing additional important planning elements. In my position as a Commander Regional Command West in Iraq, I had the need and the opportunity to engage and to work with the female members of the local establishment. And among them, let me mention Mrs. Maria Bashir, a strong, committed, and successful female Afghan legal prosecutor. In this framework, the female engagement teams and the mixed gender teams played an exceptional role. In fact, we use a coherent gender perspective with the cross-functional activities for focused outreach to Afghan women, both civilians and uniform. We trained several female members of the Afghan National Army, National Police, Border Police, with an approach that now is a routine for our missions and operations. In that region, thanks to the female engagement teams, we had a great success in supporting and providing security to women alongside with the Afghan security forces, of course, to cast their vote despite threats from Taliban and insurgents. And in cooperation with local women, we built new and unprecedented facilities like the Women Business Center, where today they can perform their activities or they can learn art and job. And more, a female penitentiary or a female prison, if you wish, was built with the criteria to meet the human needs of the women and their children, a structure that was considered a model for NATO and for the entire country. And these are only some of the objectives, some of the strategic and operational goals. And even though these achievements were partial victories, they have shown since the beginning the determination of the Afghan women to participate in the future of their countries. A country that urgently needs more female judges, more prosecutors to improve women's access to justice. And Afghanistan, we all know, is one of the almost 100 countries around the world which have signed the 1325 National Action Plan, although much remains to be done in terms of implementation. Well, these are just very few examples of the many great results that have been possible to achieve only thanks to the valuable professional presence and the fundamental role of women in uniform deployed in challenging areas of crisis. Together with the testimonies we heard this morning, these few examples might give an idea, might provide the flavor of the important added value of the female components in the armed forces. And now, at this point, I would like to share with you some personal considerations on possible future developments. The end state that all of us are looking for is an armed forces where the gender perspective is institutionalized and where there is no need for dedicated structures to implement equal opportunities. But despite much progress done, we are witnessing new challenges and threats emanating, and I'm speaking as Italian, I'm speaking as part of NATO, in particular from the South. For example, lack of positive political models, lack of economic and social development programs, limited rule of law, terrorism, poverty, illiteracy, and so on. Challenges and threats that continue to affect women and children disproportionately. Then, in the long term, a sustained effort is required. That means that more work needs to be done, both internally, but also where we operate within the wide range of peace support operations and nations. And to do this, in my opinion, we need, first of all, a dedicated and significant budget allocated to this effort, following a deep and accurate gender analysis to identify gaps. Then we need a coordinated effort among the different stakeholders, military and civilians, bringing together all relevant actors from development agencies, international organizations, and NGOs. But we need also dedicated gender staff in all operations, in a solid monitoring assessment and evacuation mechanism in place to direct and correct our investment and activities. Then I conclude, I think that without these measures, in the 10 years to come now, at the next anniversary of the UN Security Council 1325, we will be still talking about the importance of achieving our common goals, or we may be still debating on the implementation process to fill the gaps. And with this, I thank you very much for the attention, and I look forward to working together on women, peace, and security agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, General Portolano. Thank you for stressing these important issues in your work. We were talking about the need of protecting women who are quite often victims of rapes, of violence. And I'm glad you stressed the importance of working with Afghan women in securing them, in having the security in a country which used to be so liberal, so open, and then year by year with the Taliban, how we all know how difficult and insecure is life for a woman in Afghanistan. So I'm glad that also thanks to your work, women can be included in the social, civil, political, economic life of this wonderful country. And now we have mentioned so many times the resolution 1325. We are celebrating the 20 years of this UN resolution. So let's go to the United Nations, who are directly engaged on the front line, thanks also to the work of the special representative of the Secretary General on violence, sexual violence in armed conflicts. And I'm going to our guest, Pramila Patten. Thank you for being with us. And I would like you to talk about UN policy and the future commitment in the defense of women who are victims of rapes at war. Pamela Patten, we remember, is a special representative of the Secretary General of United Nations on sexual violence in armed conflicts. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I commend the Ministry of Defense for organizing this very important and timely conference and for shining the spotlight on women and armed forces. Today I will be speaking about conflict-related sexual violence, which has been the least reported and least condemned crime of war, a crime shrouded in a conspiracy of silence that shields the perpetrators and isolates the victims. The last annual report of the Secretary General for the year 2019, compiled by my office, which was debated before the Security Council in July, paints a harrowing picture of sexual violence used as a tactic of war, torture and terror, and a tool of political repression. Some 3,000 cases of sexual violence in 19 countries were recorded, with women and girls accounting for more than 2,500 of the reported cases. In 848 cases, the victims were children, with girls accounting for 803 of the cases. The report also highlights how sexual violence remains chronically underreported, fueled by patterns of entrenched gender inequality, fear, stigma, or unavailability of services, which all become obstacles impeding survivors to report or seek for assistance. Comprehensive services for survivors of sexual violence remain chronically underfunded, leaving many unable to simply meet their basic needs in the aftermath of these atrocities. And needless to tell you that this situation is now compounded by COVID-19. While the virus does not discriminate, its impact does, and victims of sexual violence are also bearing its brunt. The pandemic is already having a very negative impact on the reporting of cases, on service provision, and justice and accountability. Already a dramatically underreported crime, sexual violence now risks being further obscured by the pandemic. A direct outcome of the pandemic is an increased burden on health services as resources are being prioritized for the COVID-19 response. COVID-19 is also posing serious challenges to the effective functioning of justice systems. There are major limitations on the availability and capacity to receive and process reports on incidents of sexual violence by law enforcement and judicial authorities. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm grateful for this invitation to share with you the work of my mandate on prevention and response to conflict-related sexual violence. And indeed, the 20th anniversary of Resolution 1325 provides us with a critical opportunity to step back from our daily work, take stock of progress as well as challenges, and to chart ambitious new ways forward. I also take this opportunity to commend the government of Italy for its political and financial support to my mandate and the WPS agenda. Italy's tenure on the Security Council in 2017 was remarkable, with its focus on the root causes of conflict and crisis, the nexus between sexual violence, trafficking, terrorism, and transnational organized crime, and its efforts in reinforcing the role of women in all peace, security, and mediation processes. Speaking about my mandate, I think it's good to know, for me to tell you that it was only in 2009, through Resolution 1888, that the Security Council created the mandate of the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Sexual Violence in Conflict. The office itself was established in 2010. So 10 years is a short time in the history of war zone rape, a crime as old as war itself. And yet, the past 10 years have seen more concerted action to combat this scourge than the rest of human history combined. The past decade has actually ushered in a dramatic shift of paradigm and perspective. It has eroded a new consciousness and a new consensus that conflict-related sexual violence is a threat to international peace and security. What had long been dismissed as inevitable is now understood as preventable. What had once been deemed collateral or cultural is today condemned as criminal. So the understanding that sexual violence is often commanded, committed, or condoned as a means of pursuing military and ideological aims of armed groups has really generated new strategic approaches to fighting back. It has prompted political as well as humanitarian solutions. The progress we have made to date has been transformative in three key aspects that I will share with you. Firstly, in terms of the normative framework. Secondly, our institutional capacity. And thirdly, our operational impact. On the normative evolution, it was in 2008 that Resolution 1820 for the first time recognized sexual violence as a threat to international peace and security and elevated the issue onto the agenda of the Security Council. For survivors, this meant that their ordeal would be understood not only as a violation of individual human rights, but also as a threat to collective security. For the Council, this meant dismantling the divide between so-called hard security and soft issues and seeing war through the eyes of women and girls whose bodies had been part of the battlefield. This new approach affirmed that there could be no security without women's security. It served to directly engage a broad constituency of peace and security stakeholders responsible for imposing targeted sanctions, mandating training, and deploying peacekeepers, supporting ceasefire and peace negotiations, establishing commissions of inquiry and hybrid tribunals, and referring situations to the ICC. Resolution 1820 gave security actors new responsibilities and paved the way for a wide range of partnership that went beyond the traditional gender experts to now engage multilateral security institutions such as NATO, uniform peacekeepers, ceasefire monitors, war crime prosecutors, and military justice officials. This enables the full range of protection actors to bring the full range of tools and resources to bear. In terms of institutional arrangements, in 2009, the Security Council adopted Resolution 1888 to equip the UN with new infrastructure to respond, and this included the creation of my mandate to provide coherent and strategic leadership to global efforts, including as chair of the Interagency Coordination Network, UN Action Against Sexual Violence in Conflict, and the team of experts on the rule of law and sexual violence to strengthen institutional safeguards against impunity. In 2010, another resolution, 1960, authorized new monitoring, analysis, and reporting arrangements at country level as part of a system of deepening the evidence base for action, which is critical, and pressurizing parties to comply with international norms by listing or naming and shaming those credibly suspected of committing or being responsible for patterns of conflict-related sexual violence. In 2016, Resolution 2331 condemned sexual violence as a tactic of terrorism, including trafficking in persons for the purpose of sexual exploitation, which has been used to fund and fuel the operations of armed and violent extremist groups. This was a direct response to transnational terrorist groups such as Daesh, which reduce women and girls to an expendable currency in the political economy of war. And last year, a landmark resolution, 2467, called for a holistic, survivor-centered approach in the prevention and response to sexual violence, one of the three strategic priorities which I set since taking office in 2017. Such an approach recognizes that survivors are not just stories or statistics. Their lived experience must inform the search for solutions, including decisions about policy, programming, and resource allocation. Today, in terms of operational impact, the UN system is supporting thousands of survivors who had once been invisible and inaccessible. The two operational arms of my mandate, the team of experts and UN Action Network, are supporting survivors through concrete projects in several countries, from Bosnia and Herzegovina to Iraq, DRC, Somalia, South Sudan, and many other places. My operational methodology is to secure commitments with national authorities in affected countries to prevent and address sexual violence in line with relevant Security Council resolution. And the aim is to anchor these commitments at the highest level through joint communique and frameworks of cooperation, which in turn generate specific action plans for security sector institutions, justice sector institutions. To date, my office has signed joint communique to prevent and address CRSV with Côte d'Ivoire, DRC, Guinea, Somalia, South Sudan, Central African Republic, Iraq, Mali, and Myanmar. And significantly, a number of non-state armed groups, which unfortunately constitute the majority of perpetrators, have also issued unilateral communique and taken a number of commitments in the framework of my mandate. These frameworks enhance internal accountability for sexual violence, and this typically entails the issuance and enforcement of command orders and zero tolerance policies, and the training and mentoring of military justice actors. Some of the armed forces we work with have committed to consider the undertakings signed by commanders as one of the requirements for promotion and deployment. As part of efforts to address sexual violence, we also advocate for gender responsive and inclusive security sectors, which improve their outreach to and communication with women in affected and at-risk communities. Experience from our security sector engagements to date demonstrate that sexual violence crimes can only be addressed comprehensively and sustainably when national authorities commit to lead the response. Therefore, we will continue to place emphasis on fostering national ownership and responsibility and on gaining specific commitments from political leaders in our 19 priority countries. To highlight just one positive example at the national level, the first delisting pursuant to my mandate was of the armed forces of Côte d'Ivoire in 2017. Following their adoption of concrete action plans for the security sector developed with my office, the number of cases declined significantly over a period of time until in 2017, when there were no new allegations of sexual violence. And 7 state armed forces have undertaken similar plans. In all of these endeavors, partnership is essential to success. We have deepened partnership with the military components of UN peacekeeping operations. Peacekeepers are now systematically trained to detect, deter, and respond to sexual violence as part of their operational readiness standards. Commanders can engage with national security and defense forces, as well as with all parties to the conflict, to advocate on sexual issues. We are also working with multilateral security institutions. We have been encouraged by the fact that the NATO military guidelines on the prevention of CRS endorsed by the nations in 2016 not only cross-reference the framework of Security Council resolution on WTO, but go further by making explicit references to NATO's role in reinforcing the compliance regimes established by the Council. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my view that if civilians continue to suffer sexual violence in situations of armed conflict, it is not for a lack of international norms and institutions to protect them. It is because existing norms are inadequately implemented and enforced. It is because existing institutions are not backed with sustained political and financial support. We continue to rely on your expertise and support to translate commitments into compliance and resolutions into results. To this end, I would like to make 3 concrete recommendations for enhanced collaboration with government and other forces. Firstly, as part of international deployments, military components can take concrete action in support of strategies to combat sexual violence. For instance, military components may include incidents and patterns of sexual violence in their monitoring of armed groups and in the design of prevention and response strategies. They can assess threats to vulnerable groups in high-risk areas, such as women collecting water or firewood, and ensure that this informs patrolling plans. The military chain of command should also issue guidance on how to respond to survivors, including appropriate referral pathways. Secondly, to increase operational effectiveness, armed forces should enhance the representation and participation of women. There is a positive correlation between the percentage of women, uniformed peacekeeping personnel and police officers, and reporting rates for sexual violence crimes. The role modeling effect of women peacekeepers also galvanizes the aspirations of local women to join the national security sector. Thirdly, governments may consider supporting affected countries financially and with technical expertise to strengthen their response to conflict-related sexual violence. In the context of security sector reform, this could include enhancing the capacity of military justice institutions to address sexual violence and vetting to prevent individuals suspected of violations from being recruited, retained, or promoted. There is so much at stake. Sexual violence is a crime that shatters the lives of victims. Their voices must anchor our efforts. I was struck recently by how a survivor from the DRC articulated the direct link between individual suffering and societal impact. She said to me, "We often hear that educating a woman is educating the whole nation. But have we understood that destroying a woman means destroying the whole community? 20 years after the adoption of Resolution 1325, it is time to hear her message and heed her call to action. There can be no security without physical security from sexual violence, and no peace without peace of mind for the women, girls, and communities at risk. I look forward to our ongoing collaboration and commend your commitment to ending this scourge, which, although as old as war itself, is preventable and not inevitable. Thank you.
Thank you, the Special Representative Pramila Patten. It is so true that there cannot be peace if there is not peace in the environment of women. This is really crucial. Thank you very much. So, in this conference, we are understanding how it is important to support women's condition in post-conflict and war zones, And it is crucial to involve women in the decision-making processes in their communities. And of course, this is a task which is due to all the actors who are active in a crisis, in zone of crisis. Among these actors, there are, of course, Italian armed forces that are represented in 37 international missions in 24 countries. At the core of Italian commitment, of Italian military commitment, there is the training, the education, the civil and military cooperation, the fight against the terrorism, illegal traffic, the protection of national interests through the control of maritime communication lines. And thanks to this commitment of Italian militaries, it is possible to implement the concept of women, peace and security according to the guidelines of a United Nations resolution. And this task is carried out in missions by United Nations, NATO, European Union. That's why now we have the pleasure of going into the core of these missions. We will go and visit virtually with our guests a mission by NATO in Kosovo, the K4 mission, then one mission by United Nations in Lebanon, the UNIFIL mission, and then we will visit virtually the headquarters of the Irini mission by European Union. We start with the UNIFIL mission in Lebanon, and our guest is the General of Division Stefano Del Col. And so we go straight to Lebanon. Before giving you the floor, General Del Col, let me say just a brief personal remark, because Lebanon is kind of for me of a second home, because it's the country where actually I studied and worked. Our television that I used to have a correspondence bureau in Lebanon. So I have been many times personally to visit the UNIFIL mission, not only when there were some official visits, but also to witness and report all the activities you do on the field with the local communities. And as a student in Lebanon, I remember, which was quite strange for me as a young student, usually when you go abroad, they say you are Italian and they correlate your country to the food, the fashion, the art, the culture, or the soccer players. In Lebanon, it was the first country where whenever I said it was Italian, people were thanking me and praising our military, because of the story of our military in Lebanon. And Lebanon has a story of conflict and wars, unfortunately, and Italians military have always played a key role. So when I talk about Lebanon, there is always a very strong personal emotion and commitment. So, General Del Col, I'd like to start with you with a question. As a senior leaders of the United Nations peacekeeping and the head of the United Nations interim force in Lebanon, can you please shed some light on the importance of the landmark of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, the importance of women in peacekeeping and the importance of women participation in peace processes? You have the floor.
Also, many thanks. Thanks also. I mean, you will see panel members, guests, and all the general staff giving us the possibility to talk of a resolution, an important argument for the resolution 1325. With me from here in Lebanon, I'm not alone. We have also my general advisor, Safaf, and the military general of one of the two sectors, the Italian one and the Major Santis. Well, I'm very pleased to join you today in reflecting on why women's participation in peacekeeping, peace building, peacemaking is so essential. I will start with a quote from Antonio Guterres, Secretary General, Secretary General actually is my boss. And they say, and they underline the importance of women participation in all fields, including peace and security. The equal participation of women in all areas ensure that we benefit from the intelligence, experience, and insight of all of humanity, not just Alpha. So 2020 is a landmark year for the inclusive peace process. This year, we mark the 20th anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security, which was a milestone recognizing that women have the right to full, equal, and meaningful participation in this process, conflict resolution, and peace building. So the adoption of this resolution was significant because it was a global, first of all, recognition of the central role of women must play in preventing and resolve conflicts. And let me say that also this year we marked the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration of Platform for Action, which set the goal of equal representation of women and men by the year 2000. It was a pivotal moment of a global recognition of the right of women and girls. Unfortunately, we are already 20 years behind the shadows of this goal. The sad fact is the commitment that the world showed during the adoption of Resolution 1325 and the famous Beijing Declaration of Platform for Action is not translating fast enough into real change around the world, so in a factual way. Nearly 2 decades since the Resolution 1325 that was adopted, women still face, I have to say, unfortunately, exclusion from so many peace and political processes. Peace agreements are still adopted without provision considering the needs and priorities of women and girls. So the number of attacks against women and human rights defenders, humanitarians, and the peace builders continue to rise. We shouldn't forget also sexual and gender-based violence that continue to be used as weapons of war, with the survivors of such violence often left without justice support. So in the past 2 decades, academic research and practice have demonstrated a close link between gender equality, conflict prevention, and peace. So the Women, Peace and Security agenda, above all, calls from for a broader consideration way to prevent conflict, prevent gender-based violence, and create a peaceful, inclusive, and community and social. Women bring their own perspective and expertise to every issue, including peace and security, and peacekeeping is more effective for everyone when we have more women peacekeepers at all levels, including in the decision making. So we know that inclusivity improves the quality of our analysis and our decision making. And nowhere in the organization that we face with more complex changes on a daily basis than in the field, the women peacekeepers play an essential role for the success of peace operation. They help improve all aspects of our operation in a more, as I say, holistic approach and performance. They ensure a better access to local communities, prevent and reduce conflict and confrontation, and they serve as a role models for their peers and others. So this year, for the first time, the Security Council passed a resolution focused on women in peacekeeping. The situation of conflict is often women brokering peace at the community levels. And UN and the United Nations partnership with women leaders in their network have proven critical to build the trust and help prevent and resolve conflicts. So the number of women deployed in the United Nations peacekeeping operation remain very low. However, they have increased significantly in the past 5 years. Just to give you an example, a couple of numbers. Women constitute 22.9% of the civilian staff and 6% of the military personnel. I'm making continued effort to increase the numbers, and on behalf of the United Nations, I would like to encourage all the member states to increase participation of uniform of women in peace operations. So I always say the same also in the Security Council and in all other meetings that I have. So the COVID-19 pandemic has had a severe social and economic impact and has deepened the existing inequalities, including gender inequality. Already we have seen a reverse of the case of the limited and fragile progress on gender equality and women's rights. The pandemic also increased globally the level of domestic sex and gender-based violence to an unprecedented level. And gender equality is fundamentally a question of power. So we still live in a male-dominated world with a male-dominated culture, and have done so for millennia. Centuries of discrimination, deep-rooted patriarchy, and misogyny has created a big gender power gap in our economy and our political system and corporation. So this simply has to change, as the Secretary General underlined many times. So UNIFIL is firmly committed to women, peace and security agenda, and since given my personal experience, since 2014, UNIFIL has worked diligently, and at that time, General Portolano was the head of mission and post commander, and towards implementation of Resolution 1325. I was a Sector West commander at that time in 2014. I recall attending the first UNIFIL Gender Working Group meeting. Further, as an example of the credit that women bring in operation on the ground, I remember that at the time the Sector West was struggling to conduct some food patrol inside a certain village, and sometimes the local women were resistant to engage with the male peacekeepers. So therefore, we pioneered the market work, which include a representative from women peacekeepers, which gave us a much needed entry into the village and made engagement with local women easier. In 2018, more than 2 years ago, when I returned to UNIFIL as a mission post commander, I was very pleased to note that the market work concept has been adopted by all the units of the sector, all the battle groups of the UNIFIL, and now have become a common operation practice. So UNIFIL has either directly or in coordination with other UN agency programs. Remember that in Lebanon, UNIFIL is on the deployed on the south, but also in Beirut we have the UN country team, the ANSCO, we have ESQUA in Beirut. With all of the other UN agencies, we have a strong cooperation with young women, for example. So ensure the implementation of recommendation in the areas of economic empowerment, political empowerment, support women as candidates and votes in both municipal and national elections. So during the last year, we support Lebanon in the
We have a problem with the audio. So, General Del Col, can you still hear us? I think the line has been broken. You see, it's not easy. We're not so close. So, General Del Col, can you hear us? I think not. So,
can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear. Go ahead.
Fantastic. Excellent. We are not under attack, but maybe the technology is falling down. As I say, that what we are doing as UNIFIL, we did cross coordination with other.
Can you hear us? There are still some technical problems. Can you hear us, Generale Del Col? Can you hear us? I think think the line is not resisting. I think there are still some technical problems. Let's do another test. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome back. Yes.
Oh, well, okay. So we supported in the Lebanon the establishment of its first national action plan for the implementation of Resolution 1325. Last year, more than 15% of UNIFIL Quick Impact project budget was allocated to projects that directly address women, peace and security issues, including the Open Day of Women, Peace and Security. And we continue to maintain meaningful interaction with the representative of Lebanese women and civilian society organizations. UNIFIL is steadfast in support to the rest of the United Nations family, Lebanon and the rest of the world in its effort to increase women participation in peacekeeping, peacebuilding, protection, security, and economic growth of women and girls is at the center of the United Nations vision of a more peaceful and prosperous world that leaves no one behind. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Generale Del Colle. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, the commander and all the staff for the intervention for the mission of United Nations, which is led by a high Italian officer. And now we go to another mission, which is always guided by an Italian general. So we go to connect with the mission K4 in Kosovo, led by NATO, and we give the floor to its commander, the General of Division, Franco Federici. You have the floor.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to take part to this VTC on women and armed forces. I am not alone as well in the briefing room because, you know, normally commander need to be supported. And in this framework, I have in this room my advisor in terms of gender perspective, who is Major Schleicher from Austrian Army. And then I have also the focal point within the K4 HQ, which is who is Lieutenant Colonel Ditzler from US Army. And then for sure, I also have a commander of my subordinate units, who is Colonel Simone. Just to highlight that the field of gender perspective is spread. I would like in the next few minutes to share my experiences on how we implement the gender perspective throughout K4 operations. So the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security mandate, according to United Security Council 1325, complements K4's mission to a safe and secure environment and freedom of movement for all citizens and communities in Kosovo. Hence, it is paramount for me to consider the different security needs that the different societal groups may have. And I am particularly referring to men, women, boys, and girls. Furthermore, with a more broader approach to the gender perspective, I would like also to include the different ethnicities who are here in Kosovo. By the way, in Kosovo there are additional international organizations that implement the United Security Council 1325. I'm talking about UNMIC, ULEX, OSCE, and the European Union. We at K4 are trying to approach these security needs in a very coordinated way through a daily cooperation with those organizations to ensure that the Security Council Resolution 1325 is achieved. I want also to underline that the WPS mandate should not be seen as an add-on or a standalone concept, but it needs to be integrated into the staff procedures and assessment of all branches within the staff. By the way, the contribution of this gender perspective is fundamental in the planning phase. I'm talking about the mission analysis and the definition of the operational design of the operation, but also in the execution phase. And to this regard, at KFOR, we really engage 100% of the Kosovar society, bearing in mind the different security needs of the entire population. The JANAD advises me and other K on how to integrate a gender perspective into KFOR's operation. Gender perspective is recognizing if and when our operation will affect men and women, boys and girls, differently due to their different gender roles in the society. KFOR implements gender perspective at all levels of command through the already mentioned gender focal point structure. And the gender focal point is a subject matter expert available at unit level who ensure gender perspective is deliberately considered in the operation planning process. KFOR continues to take action to enhance its commitment towards the 4 pillars of UNCR 1325, participation, protection, prevention, relief, and recovery. Some words about participation. KFOR's role is to contribute again to safe and secure environment, to help build a lasting, meaningful, peaceful in Kosovo, not just in the immediate future, but for generations to come. We know that women can play a key role in the family dynamics, a role that is often overlooked in a male-dominated society. In order to support the participation pillar, KFOR reaches out to women leaders from all ethnic groups throughout Kosovo. By the way, just let me highlight that within the Kosovo government, we can find today 5 women in very important ministries. KFOR Gender Advisor identified influential women's organizations in Kosovo that I'm going to meet on a regular basis. And it is important to me to not only talk to the key leaders in Kosovo, but also to grassroots organizations and to get the views of women in Kosovo. For me as a commander, situational awareness is essential and will only be complete when the perspectives of everyone in the society are included. By the way, you know that KFOR was fully involved in the celebration of the 20th anniversary of the United Security Council 1325. This event took place in October, and let me just very briefly hand over to my gender advisor who organized the event.
Yes, good afternoon. It's crucial to hear from the different organizations in Kosovo, international organizations, national organizations, the Kosovo Security Force, because we want to give them a voice. We want to strengthen those institutions. And as Mrs. Claire Hutchinson mentioned at the beginning, it's about winning hearts and minds. But for us in KFOR, it's not about winning hearts and minds. It's also for keep those hearts and minds, because all of that is related to a safe and secure environment.
Conclude, I really firmly believe that gender deliberated included
There are some problems with the audio. Can you hear us?
Can you hear? Yes, I can. Okay, just to conclude, I was saying that I firmly believe that gender perspective should be deliberately included in all the planning phases and processes, as well in the execution operation. The gender advisor must be fully integrated in the staff work, should understand the commander's priority, and apply a gender perspective to support the achievement of the mission. Gender advisors need to maintain an operational focus. At KFOR, the Gender Advisor Office underwent a significant evolution through the years, and today we see the mixed Gender Office as a significant achievement. In today's ever-changing operational environment, gender perspective is something we cannot overlook. At KFOR, we are incredibly proud of the results that have been achieved concerning gender issue, and we will continue our effort in order to improve the condition of all societal groups in my area of operation. Thank you for your attention. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Commander General Franco Federici, and thank you to all the staff of KFOR of NATO in Kosovo for the great commitment in carrying out such important roles. Now, maybe we can go back to Lebanon. Let me know if you are still connected, if you're still with us, because I'd like to go back to Lebanon, to Nakura or to Shama, where there are the gender unit of UNIFIL and the gender unit of Italy. I ask you if you are still in line with us. Otherwise, we go on.
Good afternoon from Shama.
Okay, good afternoon from Shama, the gender unit of Italian Defense. You have the floor.
Thank you so much.
So it's Maggiore Michela De Santis. I introduce you, so please, you have the floor. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mistretta, and good afternoon, generals, ladies and gentlemen from UNIFIL Sector West. If we look at the aim of our mandate here in Lebanon and focus our attention on what we can do for the society in general, we have to understand that women, peace and security are three aspects strongly connected. As gender advisor, my duty is to support my commander, ensuring that all operations of Sector West are gender sensitive and target equally men and women, boys and girls, including vulnerable subjects. The impact of the worsening economic situation, coupled with the COVID-19 crisis, has affected all social standings, but especially the already poor and vulnerable families in the country. The repercussions of the crisis have an impact on the military operations. At this regard, all the gender activities aimed to support the local population were suspended since the start of the pandemic. So, when we were deployed, we had to fill in this gap, and with the aim to recreate a net of contacts, we started by having a series of meetings and project assessments in order to understand the needs and the real necessities of the local population. During our meetings, we discovered that the local population has not been properly implemented and the proper use of personal protective equipment. Therefore, Sector West Commander decided that in this historical moment, all our activities should be focused on these aspects. For these reasons, despite COVID-19, we organized several COVID awareness and COVID stress management courses in favor of groups of local women, teachers, and students from the different municipalities of our area of operation. In order to promote this important message, we have chosen women who have always paid attention and particularly contributed to grasp the universal and tangible value of dialogue. Another important activity organized and carried out in favor of the local community was a scientific webinar on the management of COVID-19 patients between prominent Italian civilian and military doctors and Lebanese doctors and nurses. The aim of the seminar was to share experiences and best practices in the struggle against COVID-19. Furthermore, another aspect not to be underestimated is stress related to lockdown and that virus spread fears as well as illness, leading to a significant increase in gender-based and domestic violence across the country. Therefore, in order to help women manage and deal with this kind of stress, we have also organized several interactive sessions in close coordination with Sector West psychologists, receiving large consent from the audience. Finally, allow me
Are you still with us, Maggiore De Santis? We cannot hear you anymore.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, thank you.
In order to help women manage and deal with this kind of stress, we have also organized several interactive sessions in close coordination with Sector West psychologists, receiving large consent from the audience. Finally, allow me to thank the Sector West Commander, Brigadier General Di Stasio, for the understanding and sensitivity shown towards gender activities, and regardless the COVID pandemic, we are fully committed to using our resources to support the most affected municipalities where health systems are weakest and people are most vulnerable. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Maggiore De Santis. And now we stay for a little bit more in Lebanon, but we move to Nakura, where there is a FAF, the gender unit of UNIFIL. So you have the floor if you can tell us your experience. Thank you and welcome. Ms. Afaf, can you hear us from Nakura? Mrs. Afaf maybe cannot hear us. We would have liked to have witnessing from Gender Unit of UNIFIL in Nakura, Lebanon, but I think she cannot hear us. Okay, so I recommend we go on, and then maybe if Ms. Afaf can be connected with us, we can go back again to Lebanon later on. So now we go to another international mission, which is led by Italians, and we go to have a look at a mission which is led by European Union, but always under the leading of an Italian officer. We are talking about the mission Irini by European Union, and the Italian officer who is guiding it is the Admiral of Division Fabio Agostino. He's leading the Irini mission. So thank you very much for being with us. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, generals, colleagues. Before starting my brief presentation, I would like to thank all the distinguished speakers, you, Mrs. Ministerodifesa, for your wise moderation, and the Italian Defense General Staff for the invitation to this significant event. I would like to commence my speech by sharing, first of all, trying to share with you a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation. Let's see if it works. Okay, that should be the case. Can you see the presentation? Perfect.
Yes, we do.
Perfect, perfect. So I would like to start with a personal thought. Let's say that the awareness of the importance of the gender issue shocked me by sensitivity in a relevant and sudden way on the 9th of May 2001, when there was the birth of my daughter, Elena Sofia, now a young woman of 19 years old. From that day, not only do I wish her to have the same opportunity in life as her male colleagues, but I am personally committed to ensuring that this is always true for all women. At that precise moment, I start to feel the need, as a man, but also as a Navy officer and a commander, to devote maximum attention to the subject to which, until then, I have probably devoted too little time and energy of my human and professional resources. On this basis, today, strengthening the woman's role within the organization I have the honor to lead is one of my utmost priority. The history of operation in the Mediterranean Sea goes back to the year 2015, when on the 24th of August, a Somali baby was born on board the Gemma frigate Schleswig-Holstein. The baby was called Sofia, and the pro tempore High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Federica Mogherini, proposed the name Operation Uniforme in Operation Uniformed Sofia. In March 2020, the mandate of Operation Sofia expired and a new operation, which I'm honored to command, was established in its place. Operation Irini was therefore launched on the 31st of March to implement the United Nations arms embargo to Libya, showing the substantial contribution of the European Union to the conclusion of the January 2020 Berlin Conference, aimed at restoring peace and prosperity in the Libyan population. Let's move briefly on the Irini task. And as you can see, the initial mandate of the operation is set for 1 year until the 31st of March 2021, and Irini's task remain more or less the same of the previous Operation Sofia, but in a different order. The arms embargo has become now our main task, and all the others are now secondary tasks. Going on the core of this presentation, let's say that Irini, in Hellenic mythology, the good of peace, as illustrated in arts, is a beautiful young woman carrying a cornucopia, symbol of wealth, a scepter, and a baby, a good omen also for the female component of the Operation Irini. Among our staff who works in the headquarters in Rome, there are women in almost every field, like intelligence, personal management, front office, media, and logistic support. Since the outset of the operation, we have continuously increased the active participation of women in Uniformed Irini. In total, there is an average of around 60 women serving on ships and air patrol at the Sigonella Air Base, an average 10 also serving in headquarters here in Roma Centocelle. Altogether, women constitute about 10% of all military personnel in the operation. As a pattern of significant involvement of women in a crucial position, I can mention the example of the Estonian women officer in the rank of Major, who as a head of medical branch in our headquarters, bravely managed the first wave of pandemic COVID-19 in the spring of this year. Thanks to her action and professionalism, the effects of the first wave of the pandemic were not significant for the effectiveness of the operation. The operation staff consists of many specialists of various nationalities from about 20 European countries. One of them is the gender advisor. This position, since the beginning of Operation Sofia, has been covered by the Polish Armed Forces. The position is assigned alternatively to one man and woman every 6 months. Currently, this function is performed by a male officer of the Polish Navy, who is seated next to me, who will soon be replaced by a female officer. This kind of alternation is also an example of the application of the principle of gender equality in the operation. To integrate mainstream gender perspective as a critical strategy in all aspects of the operation, in August, we issued the Gender Action Plan. The structure of this document distinguishes between internal and external working sectors and two objectives in each active area: integration and participation. The Gender Action Plan is a very useful supporting tool for the implementation of the European Union strategic approach to women, peace and security into all levels of the operation Irini. The personnel of operation come from various culture, legal system, and represents different levels of training and experience. However, all staff is to apply the same standards of personal and professional behavior. For this purpose, all newcomers are asked to attend our courses on basic gender knowledge, also available through our e-learning platform. At first, the personnel, during the course workup staff training, receive a presentation on gender mainstream. Then, to facilitate the learning of gender topics, all staff are required to complete two courses: Standards of Behavior and Gender Perspective. These courses can be easily updated and also expanded to specific needs. These online courses are available, and this is very important for us, also for the Libyan Coast Guard and Navy, and are in line with those provided by Operation Sophia to integrate or complement traditional face-to-face training. A total of 4 courses, including 2 of gender issue, have already been developed and are ready to be delivered to the Libyan military personnel. In particular, the Sexual and Gender-Based Violence course is intended at building the capacity and commitment of applicants to undertake actions targeted at eliminating sexual and gender-based violence and developing a movement for gender equality. Unfortunately, at the moment, the training activity in favor of the Libyan Coast Guard and Navy is suspended due to political stalemate in place between EU and GNA, the Government of National Accord. These courses will be provided as soon as this activity will resume. The promotion and highlighting of the participation of women in Operation Irini is also one of the main tasks of the OHQ Media Cell. You can find interesting material about the significant role of women in the operation in our official website and social media accounts. The operation also celebrates International and European Days, which are an occasion to raise awareness among staff as well as to support, remember, or focus on specific topics that impacted the international community. On the International Women's Day, celebrated each year on the 8th of March, of course, in the headquarters in Rome, we carry out a number of initiatives and take the opportunity to discuss about gender issues in our environment with the aim to review our organization and improve it if necessary. Such meetings are also encouraged within each assigned force element. In October this year, the European Union celebrated the 20th anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on Women, Peace and Security. Operation Irini contributes to this anniversary, celebrating with 2 videos about women in our operation and other material for social media. I will try now to show at the end of this presentation a brief part of one of these videos. In conclusion, I would like to underline that women, thanks to their daily work and commitments, contribute to the success of the operation at the same level as their male colleagues. Gender issue awareness and education is key to fight and eradicate gender-based violence and discrimination at all levels. This is why Operation Irini is committed to raising awareness among all personnel so that no episode related to gender difference occur. The men and women of Irini form a single large crew without distinction of differences, side by side at the strategic as well as the tactical level. The women and the men of Irini contribute together to the accomplishment of the mission and its operation objectives. A single crew, a single team, where everyone makes their professionalism available and share their experience. In this vein, we will continue our effort to implement the relevant UN resolution at all levels for our activities. Gender perspective should and is an integral part of our profession. Following the same path laid down by Operation Sophia, our gender policy will be also transferred to the Libyan Coast Guard and Navy when the related training will resume. These, together with other relevant training modules on human rights and international laws, will be a crucial step to bring the Libyan Coast Guard and Navy at the same level of performance of European Coast Guard and Navies. A crucial step that will allow this Libyan institutional body to take further responsibility in its area of jurisdiction in dealing with the illegal traffic and human smuggling in line with the European standards. I thank you very much for your attention, and I will try now to launch the video. Can you see the video? Not yet. Give me a second. It's a difficult. No, it's impossible for me. I'm sorry, I cannot share the video, but it's okay. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Admiral Agostini, for your intervention and for having shown us the mission that you are leading and how you are committed in implementing the principles of women, peace, and security in developing your activities. Thank you very much for your intervention. We try to go back to Lebanon. Maybe in Nakura, there is, for the gender unit of UNIFIL, there is Ms. Hafaf. Are you there, Ms. Hafaf? I don't think so. We would have liked to listen also from her for the gender unit of UNIFIL in Lebanon, Nakura, but I think Ms. Hafaf is not there. So we go on with our maybe last guest, Professor Michela Fusaschi. We are going to speak Italian now. La professoressa Michela Fusaschi è docente di antropologia culturale all'Università di Roma 3 e quindi è interessante adesso parlare con lei a conclusione di questo panel, di questo seminario nel quale abbiamo visto quanto sia importante il ruolo della donna e come la donna sia purtroppo spesso vittima nelle zone di conflitto, nelle zone di crisi, come il corpo della donna venga usato come un mezzo, come un'arma nelle zone di crisi e nei combattimenti. Ma da cosa nasce? Cosa c'è dietro questa sorta di concezione atavica del corpo della donna che può davvero essere oggetto di violenza e usato come arma in situazioni di questo tipo? Su questo ci parlerà la professoressa Fusaschi, che parlerà in italiano perché insieme a lei ad ascoltarci ci sono i suoi studenti dell'Università di Roma 3. Professoressa, benvenuta, a lei la parola.
Sì, mi sentite? Grazie mille, in realtà più che ai miei studenti, grazie mille a Laura Mistretta e grazie a tutti i partecipanti per avermi invitato. In realtà vorrei precisare che ci sono soprattutto gli studenti di una scuola superiore che è nel Basso Lazio, quindi una zona rurale dove imparare l'inglese è ancora un po' complicato e soprattutto è interessante, dal mio punto di vista, che loro si avvicinino a questi argomenti, perché sono stati loro negli anni a chiedermi di intervenire su questi argomenti. Quindi spero che ci sia anche per loro la possibilità di mettere insieme, anche attraverso le suggestioni che mi sono arrivate dagli interventi che mi hanno preceduto, e quindi cercherò anche di connettere alcune delle frasi che mi hanno soprattutto colpito insieme alla mia ricerca di campo negli ultimi 20 anni, soprattutto nel post-genocidio ruandese. Perché se da una parte, se non ricordo male, proprio Claire Hutchinson diceva che oramai la parità di genere, gender equality, non può essere più considerata un'opzione. E sì, è vero, non può più essere considerata un'opzione, però dall'altra parte ci diceva un'altra ospite, Pramila Patten, che la cospirazione del silenzio ancora è là quando parliamo di queste tematiche, e soprattutto è stata oscurata, ci diceva lei, dalla pandemia. Allora noi dobbiamo tenere in conto di quello che anche gli interventi che mi hanno preceduto hanno messo in campo, ovvero sia il fatto che quando si lavora in questo campo, e ovviamente io ho un punto di vista, se vogliamo, dal basso, no? Sicuramente dal basso, però gli interventi che mi hanno preceduto hanno messo insieme molte delle questioni, dei dilemmi, delle sfide, delle criticità che hanno a che fare con le nuove strategie di stare sul campo, non solo nel fare ricerca, che è poi un po' la questione che vorrei evidenziare con voi, e in particolare la capacità che hanno i nostri militari e le nostre donne militari nel fare in modo che, sempre riprendendo le parole di Pramila Patten, distruggere le donne, eliminare le donne significa distruggere un'intera comunità. Ebbene, in effetti io tutti questi elementi li ho trovati sul campo quando ho cominciato a lavorare nell'ambito della violenza di genere, perché a me sarebbe molto facile fare qui una casistica dei casi di violenza, anche se poi se guardiamo la sola parola dal punto di vista antropologico, si tratta di un concetto instabile, relativo. I nostri ospiti hanno anche fatto capire che i contesti locali non sono neutri. Lavorare sui campi, i campi sono diversi perché le società locali sono diverse. Allora, da questo punto di vista, se mi consente, alla nostra moderatrice, io vorrei, perché mi sono anche ascoltata tutto il dibattito questa mattina, e devo dire che lavorare nel post-genocidio in Ruanda ha permesso a me di interpretare una sorprendente gamma di emozioni rispetto alla violenza di genere, e soprattutto andare a vedere quali sono le relazioni di potere, perché quando si parla di violenza di genere dobbiamo andare a capire che non si tratta di rapporti tra uomini e donne, ma che si tratta di costruzione, nella decostruzione di relazioni di potere. Allora, da un punto di vista preliminare, io penso che la cosa migliore sia per tutti noi intanto decostruire gli stereotipi di genere, e in tutta la mattinata io ho sentito ancora utilizzare, mi consentirà, non so se gli ospiti della mattina sono ancora presenti, parole del tipo: le donne militari sono belle nella loro completezza, oppure anche ed essenzializzare i concetti di genere, perché non basta forse essere donne per definirsi una sorellanza universale. In Ruanda le donne hanno anche commesso atti di estrema violenza nei confronti di altre donne. Oggi ancora in Uganda le donne vengono stuprate, e proprio l'oscuramento durante la pandemia, come ci diceva Patten, non fa più vedere per esempio quegli stupri, tra virgolette, mi scuserà, stupri curativi che vengono messi in atto nei confronti delle donne lesbiche per riportarle alla norma eterosessuale. Allora noi su questo ci dobbiamo interrogare e guardare cosa accade dal basso, quali parole vengono utilizzate, perché per esempio sappiamo bene quali sono ancora oggi gli stereotipi che riguardano l'Africa, ad esempio, e quindi anche le diversità che troviamo sul campo. Spesso mi sento dire: le donne africane non parlano, ma non è tanto che non parlano, soprattutto è il modo di vederle. Io dico sempre ai miei studenti: il problema non è mai la diversità, è il modo attraverso il quale la si guarda, e spesso guardare le diversità parte da degli stereotipi che noi talvolta volta anche in buona fede, ci facciamo perché partiamo da delle categorie che sono quelle del nord del mondo, mentre invece lavorare sul campo locale, ce l'hanno dimostrato anche molti degli interventi, significa andare all'interno del tessuto sociale dei singoli contesti, perché l'Afghanistan non è il Ruanda, il Libano non è la ex Jugoslavia e così via. E quindi, per esempio, capire che quando parliamo di stupro in particolare, che è quello che io ho studiato maggiormente, significa anche andare a capire quali sono questi assassini sociali che prevedono una morte non fisica, cioè le donne vengono lasciate in vita, e però vengono lasciate in vita come esseri asociali, perché vengono colpite nella loro soggettività individuale e anche collettiva. Comprendere la violenza sessuale costituisce anche la forma più, andare a capire che è la forma più alta e violenta di penetrazione, ma anche investigazione, esplorazione del nemico, dicono alcuni autori. Allora, da questo punto di vista, se è vero che le generalizzazioni, l'uso anche delle grandi categorie che ci vengono rappresentate a partire da quella di violenza basata sul genere, ha sollecitato le organizzazioni internazionali a farsi carico del tema, ciò non di meno le definizioni ampie, seppur utili, e soprattutto quelle sul campo, io l'ho visto molto bene, quelle caratterizzate da un formalismo giuridico generale, talvolta hanno difficoltà a essere socializzate all'interno dei contesti, perché le visioni locali non necessariamente corrispondono a quelle che noi pensiamo siano giuste. È un po' come fare la differenza tra il giusto e il bene, e forse i due aspetti non sempre vanno di pari passo, perché appunto, dicevo prima, se noi guardiamo al contesto ruandese, per esempio, le donne hanno avuto un orribile protagonismo. Se pensiamo all'ex ministro della condizione delle donne e degli affari familiari sotto la presidenza di Habyarimana nel 94, la quale ministra, che poi è stata condannata soltanto nel 2011 a perpetuità dal Tribunale Penale Internazionale del Ruanda, istigò il figlio a violentare, seviziare e a cospargere di benzina le donne e a dare fuoco. Allora lo stupro anche qui conferma e instaura relazioni di potere e fa emergere con chiarezza che queste sono caratterizzate da microfisiche del potere che hanno a che fare con la storia dei paesi. Il genocidio del Ruanda non è un atto improvviso di un gruppo di persone che il 7 di aprile del 94 hanno ucciso 1 milione di persone. Sono atti genocidari, e le azioni genocidarie e per esempio la moralizzazione sul corpo della donna ha consentito che le donne venissero stuprate, o se guardassimo alla etimologia della parola stupro, a essere oltraggiate, profanate. C'è un altro elemento secondo me molto importante, perché spesso si dice che lo stupro è un corollario della guerra. Nella realtà lo stupro non è soltanto un corollario della guerra, perché questa profonda convinzione per cui lo stupro è un fattore inevitabile della guerra moderna ha di fatto incoraggiato delle reazioni passive, e la sorte delle donne nelle guerre ha sempre sofferto del non detto, perché si sono trovate sempre in quella zona per cui non erano combattenti. Allora, la situazione nei vari contesti, quella dei grandi lagri africani, ma anche l'epurazione etnica nei vari contesti delle guerre per l'identità, hanno cambiato radicalmente questo paradigma, perché le violenze sessuali non sono più una conseguenza, un corollario della guerra, ma sono armi utilizzate al fine di un terrore politico. La parola politica è uscita oggi più volte, al fine dello sradicamento di un gruppo, di un genocidio, oppure anche di un'operazione etnica. Il corpo, da questo punto di vista, è una delle sedi di azioni più terrificanti dell'azione violenta, e l'azione violenta è proprio quella di affermare un potere, ed è anche per questo che le donne non vengono uccise. Allora, se guardiamo anche a quando diciamo appunto siamo qui ai 20 anni delle importanti risoluzioni nel campo di cui stiamo discutendo oggi, possiamo vedere che soltanto nel 1998 il Tribunale Penale Internazionale per Ruanda, che aveva sede, ci ricorderemo tutti, ad Arusha in Tanzania, nel giudizio Jean Paul Akayesu, del sindaco del comune di Taba in Ruanda, per la prima volta gli atti di violenza sessuale sono stati riconosciuti come atti genocidari, come atti che prevedono un'invasione fisica di natura sessuale commessi su una persona in circostanze coercitive, e però non è soltanto lo stupro che noi possiamo immaginare. Ci sono stati, non vorrei dilungarmi in quella che potrebbe essere una pornografia della violenza per rispetto delle tante amiche ruandesi, alcune morte a seguito anche dello stupro, perché parliamo di ampiezze rilevanti, e molte delle donne che io ho incontrato hanno portato sul loro corpo quelle che si scrivevano, io le ho definite delle vere e proprie politiche sessuali. Queste politiche sessuali hanno preceduto il genocidio, si sono manifestate nel suo svolgimento e sono continuate anche dopo il genocidio del Ruanda, non solo in Ruanda, ma in tutta quella che è stata una guerra assolutamente dimenticata da questa parte del globo, che era la grande guerra del Congo. Allora, da un punto di vista strettamente antropologico, l'obiettivo dello stupratore è proprio il corpo della donna, la sua vittima, quella che lui vuole umiliare, violare, dissacrare, profanare, e la vuole profanare come effrazione dell'intimità. Volendo colpire il nemico nel suo insieme, lo fa attraverso il corpo femminile, il simbolo del nemico stesso. Si tratta proprio di una imposizione, un'estrema forma di oppressione. Non a caso l'obiettivo è la donna nella sua essenza simbolizzata, il ventre. È il ventre che diventa un obiettivo militare, conferendo all'azione violenta il senso e il significato di un'arma. È un'arma che è allo stesso tempo politica e di guerra, attraverso cui gli stupratori non mirano primariamente, forse consapevolmente, solo alla morte delle vittime, perché gli aggressori, e soprattutto Ruanda questo l'ha fatto vedere bene, i dati dell'ONU ci hanno fatto vedere che le donne stuprate erano dai 3 ai 70 anni, e quindi il lavoro del premio Nobel per la pace del 2018, ancora oggi Mukwege, ci racconta che tutto questo non è finito. Tra l'altro, quando noi parliamo di queste violenze sul corpo femminile, dobbiamo fare anche riferimento a un altro importante concetto che è sfuggente nel suo paradosso, che è il concetto di tortura, perché quando noi pensiamo alla tortura come qualcosa per fare parlare. Nel caso degli stupri e delle violenze delle donne, la tortura non è quella di fare parlare, quanto di fare tacere le donne, perché far tacere le donne significa proprio realizzare l'obiettivo della conquista, anche nazionalistica. Se pensiamo a quello che è successo in Ruanda, all'idea della nazione monoetnica Hutu, soprattutto in questo caso, e il genocidio dei ruandesi Tutsi. L'idea di fondo degli abusi e delle violenze sessuali quindi ha a che fare con un corpo femminile che nel tempo è stato etnicizzato, e sul suo corpo vengono iscritti determinati elementi che partono anche dalla situazione coloniale. Vorrei concludere brevemente il mio intervento parlando proprio del fatto che in questi contesti le donne diventano un nemico senza armi. Se è vero che agire ad avere un corpo militare composto da donne può agevolare determinati rapporti, perché anche oggi ho sentito più volte la questione dell'empatia, è vero altresì che talvolta non sempre questa empatia può essere data per scontata. Perché? Perché queste donne, proprio quando vedono le relazioni di potere che si nascondono dietro una divisa, anche se sappiamo alcuni interventi ce l'hanno dimostrato, si lavora per decostruire anche questo, significa ad andare a ricostruire, cercare di aiutare queste donne a ricostruire un tessuto sociale profondamente minato. Perché? Perché le donne che vengono stuprate devono morire simbolicamente per rivivere tragicamente attraverso il loro nuovo corpo, e lo dico veramente con tutte le cautele, come un ricordo ossessivo, per restare con il corpo profanato, violato e torturato a testimonianza di un'umanità che non è più umana. La vittima duplice di un processo di disumanizzazione tanto individuale quanto di comunità e di appartenenza. E in questo senso le parole di Pramila Patnan, secondo me, sono assolutamente vive. Ci tengo a dire cosa ha fatto il Ruanda dopo il genocidio, e qui veramente vorrei concludere. Il Ruanda dopo il genocidio ha messo in campo realmente una politica gender sensitive, ha eliminato la menzione etnica sulla carta d'identità, ha previsto che ci sia per legge una nuova Costituzione il 30% delle donne in Parlamento, ha recepito le risoluzioni dell'ONU delle donne come vettori di pace. Ogni giorno, io ho una mia cara studentessa che vive in Ruanda oramai da 15 anni e lavora nel campo dell'empowerment e dell'advocacy femminile, perché anche il dare giustizia a queste donne significa capire quali sono gli elementi di giustizia che queste donne vogliono mettere in campo, perché non è detto che i criteri di giustizia siano sovrapponibili ai nostri. E da questo punto di vista, in effetti, agire sulla violenza sulle donne significa agire sulle componenti strutturali che fanno emergere le questioni di violenza e non fermarsi nell'emergenza, perché è vero, l'emergenza è emergenza, dopodiché bisogna che questi tessuti sociali si ricostruiscono e questo si può fare nel lungo periodo attraverso quelle azioni, adesso scusatemi, quelle azioni di nuove strategie e di approcci olistici che anche coloro che mi hanno preceduto hanno detto di mettere in campo, finanziamenti, istituzionalizzazione e nuovi modi per poter combattere questi fenomeni che sono ancora molto molto vivi purtroppo, nonostante la pandemia, e la pandemia anzi li nasconde con gravità. La ringrazio e vi saluto tutti.
Grazie professoressa Fusati per questo preziosissimo intervento, grazie anche ai suoi allievi che ci hanno seguita. Penso che iniziative come queste possono essere davvero utili per gli studenti di qualsiasi genere e grado. Well, now we go to draw the conclusions. I think to draw the conclusion, we would need just like another panel because we have listened to many interesting and important guests and so many interesting approaches and interventions which have been very useful to understand how our militaries are committed in fighting the gender differences and how this issue is having an impact on peace and international security. Our armed forces, as we have seen, are on the front line in these issues, and we have understood through these afternoon interventions how they are an integrant, a crucial part. These issues are an integrant part of the military organization on the territory. So I thank you all very, very much for your time, for your precious interventions. And before leaving you, I'd like to remind you that tomorrow morning there is another interesting panel about gender violence and discrimination, which will be chaired by my colleague, the journalist of RAI, Fabio Chiucconi. So I leave you now, and I thank you very much for having been with us this afternoon. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you and goodbye.